Hedley Thomas, that was quite a moment. 24 years behind bars. What is your reaction?
Laura, I think it was a very stern and very respectfully delivered judgment from Justice Harrison. His reasons were detailed, and I think that he paid so much respect to Lynn and her family, particularly her brother Greg and sister Pat and her daughter Chanel. Their witness, their impact statements, their victim impact statements of several weeks ago, I think really struck a chord. The judge talked about the brutality of the crime, the selfishness of Chris Dawson. He was impeded in his lustful bid to replace his wife with a teenager. And so instead of setting out like everyone else might do in that situation, notwithstanding such a terrible age difference, he decided to murder Lynn, to get rid of her and dispose of her body, and then deny for 36 years until he was charged that he had anything to do with it. And the judge, I think, found that such appalling conduct. The tragedy that was visited upon his children, upon her family, not knowing what had happened to her, and all the lies that were told, they really didn't go well for Chris.
Is this a satisfying outcome, this sentence today?
Look, I think it represents the beginning of the end. We have only been involved in this ourselves for 5 years. For Lynn's family, you're talking about 4 decades of uncertainty and anxiety. And I can speak for some of the women that I've been talking to these past 5 years who I reconnect with regularly, who have been such a great help to me. They see this as the final page being turned in such an awful chapter of their lives and many other lives. And they remember Lynn as eternally young. They only have wonderful memories of Lynn. And I think that with the sentence, some weeks after the guilty verdict was delivered, we can really start to see people moving forward. They'll never really put this completely behind them, but the uncertainty is over, the waiting is ended. There should be no more, and Chris Dawson is where he belongs.
He's been taunted in jail by other inmates as the teacher's pet.
Well, yeah, I mean, who cares, really? Taunted, called names. Lynn Dawson was brutally murdered, had her life snuffed out, as the judge said. She was completely unsuspecting, almost certainly murdered in her own home. One of the worst victims of domestic violence, and then had her memory smeared. So if Chris Dawson's been called the teacher's pet, I mean, really.
The self-indulgent brutality of his crime, that's what Justice said. He went on to talk about the fact that she was murdered by her husband, unsuspecting, likely in her own home. I mean, it was all laid out once again for us today, Hedley.
He did a very thorough job of recapping some of what he went over in his reasons for finding Chris Dawson guilty at the end of August this year. This judge is incredibly thorough. You get a sense from watching him, as I did during the live stream, that he takes no pleasure in delivering pronouncements such as this, but to reflect the community's opprobrium, to ensure deterrence, to punish the offender, to recognise the seriousness of the offence. And he described it as being, a objectively a very, very serious offence. All murders, of course, are serious. But this one really ticked a number of pretty awful boxes, and he made sure that those were dealt with, and as a result, 24 years with 18 years non-parole. He obviously didn't miss Chris Dawson. I spoke to a number of senior lawyers leading up to this sentencing, and they are of the view that it would probably be about a 14-year non-parole period, which would make Chris 88 when he would be released. But in fact, Chris, with an 18-year non-parole period, if he behaves himself, if he's still alive, he will be 92. Now, I think he may well survive his sentence, but he's not in good health. And as the judge remarked, he may die in prison. But he is, as the judge also said, the author of his own misfortune. Nobody compelled Chris Dawson to do what he did. It wasn't an immediate or spontaneous crime of passion. He killed Lynn in cold blood, knowing the consequences, knowing that he was depriving two little girls of their mother and subjecting her family to many years of torment and pain, and very late in his life, having remarried twice, he has been punished. It's caught up with him.
We just heard from Greg Walsh, Dawson's lawyer, outside the court. It was notably pretty emotional from a lawyer in his position. He said that his client, Chris Dawson, maintains his innocence. That is not surprising. Hedley, do you expect that Chris Dawson will maintain and keep up that facade until his death? Do you have any expectation that he will tell the family where Lynette's body is?
Laura, I don't believe that Chris Dawson will ever disclose the remains, the resting place of his wife Lynn. One, because he would only do it in a transactional way, and with an 18-year non-parole period, chances are he's not actually going to outlive that anyway. So to get parole with the no body, no parole laws being introduced, that opportunity's really been snuffed out. But also it's his character. He's been in denial for a long time. I think he's actually almost persuaded himself that he didn't do this. It's also unsurprising that Greg Walsh was emotional. I mean, he has been defending Chris Dawson since December 2018, when he was first charged, just as the final episode of The Teacher's Pet was landing. And Greg is a highly committed and no doubt caring legal practitioner. You know, he certainly subjected me to a very torrid period, again, through his dedication to the rule of law, and on the basis of his instructions that his client, Chris Dawson, had done nothing wrong. Chris Dawson is entitled to maintain that view that he has done nothing wrong, and Greg Walsh is entitled as his lawyer to continue to assert that on his client's behalf. But Greg Walsh will no doubt continue to do his best. Having stepped away from the case, I'm sure he'll continue defending other clients and being as invested with them as he was in this case.
This case has captured a nation. It's gone far beyond Australia's borders as well. There's so much international interest in this case, Hedley, but it has drawn people in. It has spoken to people in a way that I haven't seen other cases do ever. And one thing I keep on coming back to, what I was talking to Damien Loon about, he said, never give up. Lynette's family has never given up. Damien Loon never gave up. You didn't give up. So today, I guess there is some satisfaction. Of course, Lynette's family is probably never going to get the burial that they deserve, but never give up.
Yeah, I think that's a very important part of it. I think what it's done is it's highlighted how good people, motivated by integrity and an innate sense that a very awful thing has gone down here, won't buckle despite the failures, utter failures of police in the early years and of the institutions, the failures of the Office of the New South Wales DPP in 2001 and 2003 and for some years afterwards to prosecute this case, when it was abundantly clear to many people that there were grounds to run a murder prosecution. And the people who supported Lynn, people who knew that she had met with foul play, her friends, her family, JC, the former babysitter, Damien Loon, myself, and of course, in the later years, the incredibly dogged work by the detective Daniel Poole from the Homicide Squad Unsolved unit, that they have turned the tables on the institutional failures that blighted this case for years. And it shows, I believe, that the system gets it wrong, and that when it does, it's incumbent on journalists and members of the public to really push hard to be heard, to not be cowed by the criticisms of some in the criminal justice system who would prefer us to just shut up and take our medicine once a decision's been made. No, if something bad has gone down and the system hasn't properly responded, then it should be called out, and called out very loudly and repeatedly until the system corrects.
Well, I guess that's the conclusion, Hedley. The long years of work by you and those detectives today, it's the end of that chapter. Yes,
I hope that it is a conclusion, Laura. I hope that we can all start to move into sometimes, more positive spaces, but we will always have a bond. I've got to know some amazing people on the northern beaches. Those women I referred to, Lynn's friends from the childcare centre, her neighbour, people like Julie Andrew and Sue Strath and Rebecca Hazel, and there are so many former students of Cromer High, people who have supported what I've done, people who backed the police investigation, people who came forward in the podcast and went to the police, people who have listened and become incredibly invested in Lynn's case. They've all made a big difference. They've all expressed their grave concerns, their alarm. They've been part of, I think, a movement in some ways that has been determined to get justice. And it's achieved justice. Now we have a sentence. Chris Dawson's going back to jail. Now he knows for exactly how long. We don't need to worry about that anymore. And, it's a just day.
Well, thank you for your work, Hedley. Thanks so much for talking to us this morning. It is a just day indeed.
Thank you, Laura.